Greetings, it is I, Tentus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, the second edition of AD&D. Where we left off, underwater combat we were talking about, because we were talking about unusual combat situations. Let's finish up underwater combat and move on to a big one to want to talk about, treasure and magic items. Now for underwater combat, though, we were talking about vision. There's a little more details, because the fact is, light isn't the only thing that's going to limit you when you're going underwater. There can be things there. Seaweed, kelp, fish, all these can block your possible vision. If you get like a school of fish in between you and whatever you want to see, you're not seeing it. It's going to block your vision. So vision can be limited by things even in the ocean. Now on the other hand, if you have infravision, it does work underwater, but it is limited. It is limited out to the maximum range you would normally have, the normal range you would have underground. Whatever that is, that's sort of what you're limited to. You really can't expand beyond there. So there is this limitation to infravision when dealing with underwater. Let's talk underwater and combat. Because the fact is, majority of weapons that you're going to be using underwater are horribly inefficient because of the drag through the water. Something like a thrusting weapon, you don't really have any problems, but anything else, it's not going to work very well. Things like foam weapons don't work at all. Missile weapons, if you're certain types of crossbows, you work just fine. But generally speaking, it's going to be about half the range you normally would have underwater to use these missile weapons. Nets do actually work very well. They open up a lot, but they have incredibly short range. Pretty much based straight on your strength. Score to figure out how far you can actually throw it. So nets are useful, just short range. This is not to say you can't have magic which can allow you to use weapons more efficiently underwater. It does technically exist. Especially for things like your melee weapons, that's when it's going to really come in because it's not separating from your body. Range stuff, not so much. Now if you're fighting underwater and you're using basically hand-to-hand type techniques, you add 4 to your initiative. It makes it a little harder for you to get those moves in. If you're using missiles or magic, you don't worry about the initiative penalty. For any of them, if you should make an attack underwater, -4 to that attack roll. It becomes more difficult to attack with it. Spells are affected too. You can't use fire spells underwater. Do not work at all. Electric spells, they tend to have discharge into the water around where they're cast, so they tend to be more area-based spells. If I create a lightning bolt like 60 feet away from me, not only is it going to be its normal lightning bolt kind of area it's going to fill up, it's probably going to also discharge in an area similar to a fireball. So yeah, discharge into the water. You also can't use any kind of spell that affects natural forces that are underwater. Wind. If I do some kind of spell that affects wind, there is no wind underwater. Similarly, if I use a spell that either summons or controls a creature that is not living underwater, also doesn't work. It doesn't live underwater. Now let's start talking about treasure and magic items. Treasure is something very important to characters. Characters can get all sorts of rewards for completing quests, but the fact is, things like titles or property, they're less tangible than, let's say, a pile of gold. A pile of gold is the kind of tangible value that players look at and feel like they want to gain. Treasure is also very important to characters because you might need that to exist in the world. Maybe the treasure you're seeking out is giving you enough money to live, to move on from day to day. You might just end up being rich because of it, but it's the fact that this treasure is coming to you and you're using it for your character that it exists there. Treasures aren't just gold, though. Most of them reflect a gold value. The fact is, when you go out adventuring, you find more and more deadly and dangerous threats as you go. You're going to need better weapons, armor, and other equipment to keep going on the supplies. Adventurers require money. So you need money to make money in this case. Hence the use of treasure is that step along the right way of getting the money you need for the next adventure that you're going on. Most treasure you usually can tell the value of, but there are items which it might be difficult to tell the value of when you're looking at it. Some of it you might just be able to look at and go, it's a gold piece. Other ones, you might need specific skills in order to judge how much this costs, or you might have to go to people with those skills to figure out what kind of value you have from these gems or objects of art that you've taken up. They might vary depending on the city, too. An object of the art might be looked at better in one city than the other. So there are open concepts, open money amounts within the treasure you're going to get. Treasure is not just gold and jewels, though. You can have common goods, which are treasure in of themselves. You might have casks of wine, which they just look like casks of wine. They're normal things. They could have incredible value to them. You never know. So there is treasure in other different forms. You could be looking through some old papers in a ruin, find an ancient deed, which according to the laws of the kingdom you are in, still work, so now you own property. You could actually manage that property, or you could sell it to someone that wants to manage it. You've just found treasure in a different form. Now, magic items are a big part of treasure. They are very important because they supplement your characters and make them more powerful. They are things that alter your characters intrinsically. So, it is up to your dungeon master about when and where to use magic items and to choose how many. Your dungeon master could choose a game which there aren't many magic items, where a potion is very expensive because it's very rare. Or it could be a game where magic items are common, and that everybody has one or two of them. It is up to your dungeon master's choice about how many they want to put in there, but once they're adding them in and once they're deciding it, the fact is characters are more than likely going to need them to supplement their abilities as they get stronger in order to fight those monsters. They can either make them, find them, or buy them. All three of these require money. Money to make one, money to buy one, and money to go on the expedition in order to find one in the first place. So as you can see, it requires some gold in order to get magic items, regardless of the process which is going about. Your DM will manage this as best they can to get you see what kind of rewards you can get as see fit. But this is when we talk about treasure itself, because your DM is going to measure how much you're going to get in the long run. Are you going to become rich characters that will have a lot of money? Or are they giving you just enough that you can scrape by effectively day to day, adventure to adventure, enough that you can fund your next one and barely going by? Both of these are very interesting concepts to play. And the fact is, when you're putting together a treasure, there has to be some kind of reasoning behind it. Because the fact is, it's amount of money that is out of circulation. It's not in a bank, it's not in someone's possession, it's not out there to be spent. It's just sitting somewhere in some location. Granted, you could give a history to it, but don't be complex. It might just be good to give some kind of history of why it's there in the first place. You know, a dragon created this hoard. Bam, that's why it's there. Dragon's dead now, but left it there. It's there to claim. People think it's haunted. Something like that. You've come up with a base story, excuse for your players to go there. So you effectively come up for some kind of reasoning behind it. Now, you could be a little bit more open-ended, too. You could have had that this is like an ancient civilization, long since forgotten, had this treasure. It could have been that they had more money then. They had more infrastructure to make mines. Or it could have been that this was, just lost to the ages, that they had a bigger area, and this area just hasn't seen the same influx of gold in it since then, because they effectively had hoarded it, fell into disrepair, never came back with that money. Or you could just say something like a Dark Ages, where the amount of money that's being printed isn't very much, that there isn't as many major kingdoms. Then you might find these influxes of ancient treasure from before the Dark Ages hidden in places. There are lots of little storylines you could come up with, various reasons to why this treasure existed and why it's not technically on the market. I mean, you can come up with a reason for it, but the fact is that there is a big influx of money to an economy, so you sort of have to look at why it's been removed from that economy just a little bit. I mean, it's not 100% necessary. You want to build it enough to make it make sense in the world. Dragon did it's a great excuse for a lot of things, but why people didn't fight to reclaim it, that's an entirely another thing you're getting into with your characters and what effect it had back then, even leading into now, the fact that the dragon hoarded it. And these are just a few of the possibilities when it comes to building the reasons behind your treasure, and then getting into the fact that your adventurers are looking for this treasure, that they need some kind of information that's going to give them motivation to look for this treasure. That's an important part of it too, that they learn about it in some way, or they're exploring an area and they're like, oh, treasure, cool, look what we found. We could use some money. Maybe they're looking for a certain item and come upon a treasure hoard that it's hidden within. These all exist as possibilities within your game system as you're building it with your players that make it that this is an exciting thing that they're going to discover, whether on purpose or by accident. Treasure will fill them with glee. So that's it for today. I finished up talking about the unusual combats with underwater combat, talking a little bit more about, well, the actual combat side of underwater adventures, and then I moved into talking about treasure and magic items. Mainly I was talking about treasures today, defining a little bit what it means to have a treasure in a game, talking a little bit about the components of it, including magic items, but talking about also how you would include it in your game and why you would include it. Important things that basically help establish its existence and kind of create a continuity to your game world. More on treasure next time as we move through some more treasure and move towards talking more about magic items. But regardless, if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It's just for the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon. Link in the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.